to order for March 22nd, 2016. First order of business is going to be the claims. And the first claim the first claim is for Mr. Petrov at 41 West Street, Malden, Mass. Essentially during last winter's storms, his front fence was severely damaged by Malden snow removal efforts. This is in Ward 2. Councilor Condon, would you like to speak on this one?
Last winter, this gentleman's fence was knocked over due to a snowplow. He had since had the fence fixed, and it was, I think it was $480 that his claim is made out for. And I haven't seen the report from Public Works, but I'm sure Mr. Knox is familiar with the claim, and I haven't heard any negative feedback from it. We don't deny that it happened, and I would be in favor of paying this resident the money to replace his fence.
Yes, Mr. Knox has weighed in and said in writing to us that indeed that is the case, the way it is described. Are there any questions from the rest of the committee? Councilor Matheson. So typically when these claims are addressed, we have two inquiries. One from the departmental director, such as Mr. Knox, to corroborate the claim itself. I don't have that paperwork, but I'll take your word for that. And secondly, a paid receipt from the resident that they actually expended the money and not an estimate, because estimates and markups can vary from the actual cost. Typically we have a paid receipt. Do we have a paid receipt for those funds?
Yeah, we have a receipt here for Mr. Petros, I believe, is here, isn't he? Mr. Petros? My understanding, he actually paid $595 for the fence, but I explained to him that the claims committee can only give $500 on a claim. And he was willing to settle for the $500, even though there's a receipt in here for $595. So,
I've reviewed the file. There is a receipt in there, an actual receipt on this one. Because the funds expended exceed $500, we would need a release from the resident rather, that he's not going to pursue any funds over the $500 if we're going to approve this $500. As long as he's willing to sign the release, then I'm willing to approve. Vote in favor. Councilor Condon.
so I make a motion that we pay the claim of $500 pending approval that he will not seek further action to the court system.
I've got a second from Councilor Sika. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous vote. The second claim was by Mr. Carlozzi at 134 Salem Street. Councilor O'Malley, this was in your ward. I understand there's no receipt on this, so do you want to make a motion on this?
Yeah. As you're aware, we do have this this incident that occurred on January 23rd, 2016, regarding rock salt and assault the roads in Ward 4. The claim is that the So I've suggested that he get his car repaired and then come back with a receipt. So I motion to table.
We got a motion to table. Do I have a second? Second by Councilor Seeker. All in favor? Aye. That concludes that part of the meeting. The next part of the meeting, we'll talk about the streets and to adopt a plan. A plan was put forward last week, and I'll hand it out. Yes. As the sponsor of this plan, all that the council can do is actually make a resolution. It is ultimately up to the mayor to come down with what he wants to do. This has been in limbo for almost a year, if not, almost a year since last June. A number of plans came down. None of them have happened. So in an effort to push things forward, I submit this plan to you only for resolution purposes and discussion. But this year we know, in the fall last year, the city council allocated the remaining funds that were left for the roads to design for 9 roads. Those are slated to go. The cost that was explained to us back in January, when we had our last roads meeting, was that it would cost $4.5 million to do that. The proposal that is in front of you, and I am somewhat reluctant to agree to this, although I wrote it, but would, just to get us off where we are, is to take $2 million from the water and sewer enterprise surplus and take $1.7 million from the city reserve, and then Chapter 90 funds, there'll be somewhere around $1 million in fiscal year 2017. And would expect the mayor to kick in $800,000 of his Chapter 90 funds. Just for reference, the mayor has suggested that he would be willing to kick in $400,000, but last year, and I won't belabor the point, we got a letter from the mayor saying he was willing to kick in $1.2 million last June, from last year's and then this year's. And then in September, we got an email from the mayor saying he would kick in $900,000 this year because they had already spent $300,000. And then in the last meeting in January, we were informed that pretty much everything had already been spent, so there was not $1.2 million. The overall deficit on the roads is $20 million. Got to find a way to pay for them. So, I'm just floating this idea out there. Open to any councilors now. Thank you. Councilor Matheson.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to see a proposal that shows the distinctions between the prior iteration of the work to be done and the current iteration of the work to be done. And to speak more specifically, some of the streets now being proposed to be reconstructed have gone from full depth reconstructions to mill and overlays, and yet still others are being proposed to be patched rather than mill and overlay, which is the least amount of work you can do. I'd like to see which streets have been downgraded for the amount of work to be performed and which ward those streets are located in, so we know exactly what we are funding going forward. Secondly, I had spoken with the mayor earlier today and signaled to him my hope and expectation that he would pledge $500,000 per year for the next 4 years of Chapter 90 money amounting to $2 million. I think that what you are proposing here is just FY17, is that right, Councilor Chairman?
That is only the first portion. There is actually a second portion on your sheet, and I am proposing, because it is a $20 million problem, not created by the council. The buck did not stop at the council, but we were told on June 3rd of 2014, and there is a presentation that you can see online. There is also a YouTube video if anybody would like to see that. On that date, we were told by the financial team and Bob Button and the engineering team, sent down by the man, that he needed $6.78 million to complete all the roads. 9 months later, in April, we were told that that was $14 to $15 million. And then we were told it was going to be $20 million in January. So I certainly hope there's, rather than going full depth reconstruction the other way, it was the fact that we had full depth reconstruction. But I can't answer that question because this has been a guessing game all along. But the second part of this plan was to have the mayor sign an agreement that is Chapter 90 funds in the amount of $665,000 will be set aside each year to pay off a $10 million bond over 20 years. That would be a 20-year amortization, which is about the life of the street, at a 3% interest rate. That may seem harsh to the mayor, but we get about $1 million in Chapter 90 funds a year. And right now, as the presentation from the financial team came down last week, we cannot afford to bond a dime to add on to our structural operational deficit without having a funding source to fund it. So my suggestion here is that the buck stops on the 6th floor on the overrun here, and then that discretionary spending should no longer be discretionary. And those people whose streets out there that are all dug up and have been in some cases for 4 years have the right to expect that their streets be completed like the other people's streets were completed in this city. None of this talk, none of this nonsense about leaving zippers in the road or doing a half-baked job because they came later in the process. I think you owe it to we owe it to the citizens to do the job right, do it once, and everybody has got to have skin in this game. We've already got our skin in the game in the operational budget, and the problem that we're stuck with now, trying to figure out how to solve that. So I'll hand it over to another councilor. That's the second portion of it I was going to talk about later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm wondering where the debt is going to be attributed to. Is it going to be attributed to the water and sewer enterprise fund? I think that's what the mayor has proposed. Or is it going to be attributed to the general fund? Either way, I understand your commitment of the Chapter 90, and I understand the water and sewer surplus. I think the question is, are we going to put this to the enterprise fund debt, or are we going to put it to the general fund debt, which seems to be a little overloaded based on last week's proposal? And before I go to that, the other thing I'd like to hear is, how much water and sewer reserve is there? Last year, I recall that it was about $3 million in reserves, and I think the mayor has a policy, an internal policy of keeping 5% of those reserves in place and untouched. I don't know if this would put us below that policy or not, but I'd like to maybe speak with the controller if he happens to have that number about what the water and sewer reserve is.
Could Mr. Rennick come forward and answer that question? Thank you.
So, Councilor Councilor Matheson, I think you're pretty much exactly right on. There should be about $3 million in reserves as of the close of last fiscal year. There was a policy adopted as part of the overall city policy that the water sewer fund retain at least a minimum of 3% of the overall budgeted reserves, and then anything in excess of that can be used to, to reduce future increases in water rates, to be used for capital projects. So it's the water sewer enterprise fund's just under $30 million. So about, I think it's like a $3.3 million surplus. So yeah, about $2 million could be used as part of this proposal and still, be within our policy of maintaining that 5%.
Are there any other questions of the controller? Councilor Condon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at this $4.5 million, I see $2 million from the water enterprise surplus. But I believe state law only allows us to use that money for water and sewer, fire hydrants. Doesn't cover any kind of overlay or any kind of sidewalk work. So I look at this figure and I'm saying to myself, how much more water work does he have planned to do? Are we going to go back and pay some of the water that's been worked on? How are you going to do this and stay within state law?
So in terms of the water work that's already been done, we wouldn't be going backwards. For the water pipe that's already been replaced, we had SRF, State Revolving Fund, funding to do that. So the reserves, that $2 million that Councilor Kinnon was proposing, would be used, for a street that was ripped up to replace the water pipe. A portion of those reserves could be used to put a mill and overlay down on top of that. In terms of anything further, in sidewalks and things like that, that's where city funds would have to be used, which would be the other funding sources. So the $1.7 million in city reserves, that would be used theoretically for the sidewalks, the Chapter 90 money. So the $2 million in water sewer reserves would be done for a smaller percentage of the overall scope of the work.
So you're saying that if there was water work done, we're going to overlay the street and pay for it with the enterprise fund?
Correct.
How can you do that?
Because the street was ripped up to replace the water pipe, so you would be allowed to use a piece of the water sewer enterprise fund to bring the street back to a drivable type of condition. Anything in excess of that would be where the city reserves come into play, the Chapter 90 money, or any other borrowing that we may do to complete this project.
When you say that, basically you're saying you're allowed to patch where you dug up.
Correct. You're allowed to do, the bare minimum. I would argue that more than a patch, but a mill and overlay would be allowed within the water sewer enterprise fund to bring the street back. The original purpose of tearing up the street was to replace the water pipe. After you replace the water pipe, you still have to get that street back to a condition that can be, drivable.
Not mistaken, back when we started this program, originally it was kind of alarming. I think we had close to 150, 200 black hydrants. I was up in the engineer's office last week. I think I counted pretty close to 40 still left. So we've done a good job in changing those black hydrants to green. But we still have some ways to go to assure that people that live on dead-end streets, and that seems to be, I know our city engineers here and Mr. Knox, that seems to be a very big problem. People that live on dead-end streets, they seem to have more black hydrants than anywhere else. But are we going to continue on the water program, or are we not? What's the plan?
I believe believe that's a decision that still has to be worked out between the mayor and the city council in terms of future work. Right now, we're concentrating on getting caught up on the streets that have already been dug up. But, you know, it's certainly, I'm sure the city engineer and the DPW director will talk about this more tonight, but it's certainly a priority. You know, the priority from day one was replacing the water main pipe. So now the priority, you know, given that we have over 50 streets open, is getting caught up.
I know that it seems as though the program's spun out of control during the last few years. No one put a handle on how far we're going with this, and then I know there are some areas where they're looking for, they don't have sidewalks, and they haven't had them for 50 or 60 years, and they're looking for new sidewalk work. I don't think that was originally part of the scope of the program.
Yeah.
To put in new sidewalks. I thought the program was to move forward to the water and replace the black hydrants to make them green.
Yeah. Councilor Madden.
Yeah, I'll speak very briefly, just as a point of information. I know that the Ward 2 councilor just joined us here, but it was a complete streets, a holistic approach to repairing all cracked sidewalks as well as resetting crooked curbs and completely redoing the street as well. So that's what was included in the CIP, which was originally funded back in, I believe, 2012. I think I have that right. So that's for information.
Yes, I'd like to add into that as well. Originally, again, before we went crazy here, it varied by street. Some were full depth reconstruction, some were just the mill and overlay, depending on the shape they were in. And then those that had, for instance, asphalt sidewalks, from day one, they were supposed to get new sidewalks. That was the plan. Many of those got jumped in the process. Those that were done in 2012 and are still out there, yet to be done, yet to have their streets done, yet to have their sidewalks done. And again, there have been streets in many wards where sidewalks that were indeed already concrete were all replaced. And these folks who have asphalt sidewalks now are supposed to say, oh, well, we're sorry, we screwed it all up. You can have a patch and you can have asphalt forever. I don't think that's equitable. Thank you. Councilor.
Thank you, Councilor. The figure $20 million is just scary, and it seems as though it's unreachable for us to be able to spend this kind of money, particularly when we had the meeting last week in a five-year outlook that we enter into a budget season. We're already down $6.5 million. So to even think about going out to borrow more money, it's puts us in a vulnerable position, in my opinion. I think, and I know we have a financial team here, we're already bonded out to the max. I think our debt and interest is probably close to 3 times what Medford pays, twice what Revere pays, and to go out to borrow more money and add to that figure, whether it comes from the Water Enterprise Fund or not, it's just a scary position to put the city in. And I'm not sure what the answer is, I have to be honest with you, other than to try to get by this year, do work, next year's another year. I just don't see how we can possibly move forward and attack a $20 million problem. Thank you.
I don't have that. So I just have to speak.
Councilor, go ahead.
So I definitely agree with everything that Councilor Condit says, or the Councilor from Ward 2. I know that in light of Flint, Michigan, and in light of everything that's going on here, I think it's very important that we deal with our lead pipe issue. I think that is something that is of the utmost importance. I think the public health of the community is very important. I'm not necessarily saying that our roads conditions are acceptable, but I do think it's very important that we keep the eye on the goal there, and it's really to reduce lead pipes in our city. We don't want something like what's happening in other places in this country. I know that the mayor had sent down a proposal where we would review and potentially scale back the scope of work. And that proposal would be to do a mill and overlay rather than a full depth reconstruction. And the full depth reconstruction would be tearing up all the sidewalks, tearing up the whole road, and then redoing that. Sidewalks are separate. It sounded like to me we were talking about doing the sidewalks over for these roads.
Councilor, feel free to read the letter the mayor sent down if you'd like, because it talks about just not doing the sidewalks in many cases, and in fact, in some cases, and we certainly need clarification, the end of that letter talks about just leaving the zipper that's currently on there on roads. Does it not?
I'm familiar with what you're referring to.
Okay, so I'm correct about that.
Well, I'm just talking, well, so what I'm saying is,
I'm just saying, he hasn't sent the plan down. He sent a memo suggesting a number of things. There's no plan in front of us. Doesn't say where the money's coming from, how much it's going to cost. It's not a plan, it's a suggestion. Go ahead.
so I definitely think that what I was trying to get to is the fact that I think it's important that we make sure that we're doing this right. I do think that there's a chance to reel in the cost here by doing a mill and overlay and not necessarily having to rip up sidewalks and redo sidewalks. I think that at this point, like Councilor Morty said, we're in a very dire financial situation, and I think that doing what is required and just redo the streets, get them to drivable conditions should be what we're focusing on. So I do think there's a way forward in to reel these costs in.
Councilor Matheson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that the chair made an excellent point that the roads that got postponed should not sacrifice in quality for the mere fact that they got passed over. I think we need to adhere to the CPI index, that is the PCI index. If it has any value at all, and the mayor's office has reported that it does, if the roads come in very low on that index, I don't think we can mill and overlay them. I think you're looking at a solution that is no solution at all. It may come apart in a couple of years. At least that's what was represented to us. As far as the sidewalk work, that's not what a mill and overlay means. It doesn't mean that you're taking out the sidewalk portion of it. That's separate and distinct from the road work. The full depth reconstruction, from my understanding, we have our city engineer, a very knowledgeable man here with us, he can correct me if I'm wrong, takes us down to the subsurface soil, and you even it out, you build up the base layer and the asphalt from there. A mill and overlay takes the existing old asphalt, grinds it down to a point that it's uneven, it's a grate, and then you put new asphalt over that. It has nothing to do with sidewalks, just for our edification here today. And my point isn't, we're looking for sidewalks, we're gonna hold this thing up to sidewalks, but if Ward 3 came later in the process, I don't think we should be downgrading the quality of road that we receive. I want to do the project right the way it was originally envisioned. Thank you.
From the chair, just so we're absolutely crystal clear about the plan that I did propose. It does not add to the city's bonding and debt without a funding source to pay for it. So it does not put us in any more dire straits. It takes the future Chapter 90 money, which if you read the law, is really supposed to be used for roads. And it makes the mayor, who is largely responsible, as the buck stops on the 6th floor on the road project, largely responsible for what went on here. it makes him have a significant portion of skin in the game going forward. It limits what he can spend, absolutely. It didn't take all his Chapter 90 away. Perhaps that should be done. But it takes 2/3. It leaves enough for emergency purposes. And it keeps us living to a promise to the people that had their streets ripped up, so that we move forward without putting any more on the operation side. We are stuck with a real hole in the operation side. But let's be clear, the Chapter 90 money, no matter how it's used, is not going to alleviate what's on the operational side, because it has to be spent on capital. You cannot use it for schools, you cannot use it for the fire, for the police, for anything like that. So the reality is, all this proposal is saying is, we have a plan, and that Chapter 90 money is going to go to the roads that were already dug up, not to future roads to do favors over here, or, well, I'd like to point to that street and have it done. It still leaves a very little money, but it pays for what's already been done. Somebody's got to do that. Thank you.
I guess my question is, does this proposal suggest ripping up some perfectly good sidewalks and redoing them?
No, it does not. This proposal suggests those streets that were promised full depth reconstruction might get it, if they certainly need to be reevaluated for that. But those who had sidewalks that are asphalt, not concrete. The concrete would be done like many of our streets were, where you have cracked concrete. Those panels would be fixed, certainly. But maybe the whole street, like many of the first streets in the queue got, wouldn't be done that way. But certainly those people who are stuck with asphalt sidewalks that are 80 years old, their sidewalks would become that way and become handicapped accessible, which is another thing that's important as well. Go ahead.
So I definitely agree with the handicap accessibility, and I do understand what you're saying. I do think it's important that we reevaluate these streets and make sure that we're not taking up perfectly good sidewalks and replacing them with brand new sidewalks. I think that it would be a misuse of our funds here, and that's just really what I want to get across here, is if we have good sidewalks that are currently handicap accessible, they should not be ripped up. This money should not be going towards that.
Councilman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We really have to address the feedback coming from these speakers. But at this point, I really like the proposal that's put before us. But in light of what we heard last week, I'm wondering if we're able to tap a city reserve. And I know we're going to get pushback from the mayor on this one, and I'm not commenting on whether or not we should or shouldn't get pushback. But we might need that city reserve in the budgeting process. 1.7 million is allocated there. I wonder if that can come from another source. I know you submitted the proposal, and like I said, it's not a bad one. Mr. Rannigan, you're going through the budget process with the mayor right now, and we haven't had an update on where that's at, but where do you see this city reserve? Is that going to take us below our threshold? What are you using for city reserve for the FY18 budget? I'm sorry, 17 budget? Could you answer that?
Yes. So in terms of the FY17 budget, I think it's still a little too premature to speculate how much may or may not be used in it. It's still in the preliminary stages. I know that the mayor's anxious to get it sent down as soon as possible. Given the presentation last week and what we're facing, just to ensure that the city has adequate time to review it and vote on it prior to June 30th. If you remember the last slide of the presentation, it talked about the reserves where we are today. It was the 15.9 million minus a few other things, bringing us down to about $10 million. considering we're using zero in the FY17 budget. So every dollar of reserves that are used in the FY17 budget would come off of that. I did want to point out, in addition to that, the June 2014 presentation included what we called Phase 5 redirect, which was borrowing against the Water Sewer Enterprise Fund in the amount of $6.78 million. That has not been borrowed yet, so that money is not factored in to the $20 million hurdle that we're facing to finish these streets. So that would still be, if it was the will of the council, a potential funding source as well.
Any other council comment?
So you're talking $6.9 million that you haven't gone out to bond yet? And that will be paid through the enterprise fund also? Let me ask you this, and I know our city engineer is here and the DPW director. Has there been any thought to run pressure tests on these 40 black hydrants out there to make sure that we're not going to put ourselves and the people in danger? If there are any concentrated areas of black hydrants, maybe if the chairman doesn't mind, they can come up and maybe address that question.
Yes, I'd like to have the city engineer come up. I think you're best probably on the black hydrants. No?
Good evening. I don't believe now, after this program, there are any isolated areas of the city with a lot of black hydrants. Now, the issue with the black hydrant, it isn't the hydrant itself that isn't operating. It's the condition of the pipe that's feeding the hydrant. So your fire department, they're only concerned with volume. And if, as I've shown you, these pipes get smaller and smaller inside. These hydrants don't get the volume of water they need to fill the pumper trucks. So the inside of the pipe is very narrow. So the only way to correct it is to replace the pipe in the street.
But if that hydrant is near, say, a secondary road, doesn't mean you have to do the whole street, correct? You could go into the closest road in order to feed the hydrant.
That would address that. That would address the hydrant. You also make sure we have line water. So we've been replacing the old pipe, which is 100 years old, along with the lead water service pipe and the hydrants.
Let me ask you this. I know we have hydrants that are black that border other cities. And I know that there's gates when you go from one city to the next. But how much does it cost to, say, put in a meter at that gate to address, say, a dead-end street with a fire hydrant that I would assume, work much better if that gate was open?
During a fire?
Yeah.
I mean, to put in a meter is very simple. I think the question would become, given the time when there's a fire, whether there would come to mind to go get the meter and bring it down and put it on the hydrant, if there's a fire, And you'd be relying on your abutting town, city's water system, which, might be old as well. As you're correct, Councilor, every city is separate from the other one because we're fed by the NWRA and we got to keep track of where the water goes within the boundary lines of our city, so.
Could you put a meter at the gate? That's what I'm asking. in case, example, Murray Hill Park, believe it has a black hydrant at the end of the road. But it's very close to the Medford-Malden line. Could you put a meter at the gate in case there, say, was a fire in that area, to open up that gate and get water to that hydrant in a much better fashion?
You could open the gate, and you have portable meters put on, you have to be a hydrant in, not the case. So there are portable meters that you put right on the spindle of right on the hydrant. So whatever our hose is feeding, to put the fire out, we can register.
Mr. Russell and Council Condon, I think we're getting off subject here.
But I would just say to the people involved, and I think our DPW directors here, I would feel much more comfortable knowing that those 40 hydrants out there, that maybe we do pressure tests on them to see exactly how bad some of them are. I know some of them would work, but not as well as they should, but at least identify the ones that are severely not working, and maybe come back to the council with something.
The fire department themselves go out and test them.
Could we get a report saying the 40 black hydrants? I know the water department could help us with that also. Okay, thank you.
Any more councilors on the road issue? Okay, I think we're out of time for this evening, unless somebody would like to stay after the council meeting and continue. If not, I will reschedule for the participatory budget. I would say this, that we are now in construction season. The city council allocated the money late last year for the design of the $4.5 million of streets. If we do not get going and do not have a plan within the next few weeks, we probably won't even get those few streets done in 2016. We are trying, as a council, to push this forward. Some ideas have been put forward, but we need something to come down from the mayor, because he's the only one who can do that. And I guess we'll leave it at that, unless any other council has anything else. Looking to adjourn the meeting. We will have the participatory budget coming next week. And just want to say this much on the overall budget. I want to thank the financial team last week for giving a great presentation. It's a very important topic. I did a little work on that myself, and I can tell you, even if we make every budget that is under our control, and the mayor brings us down a budget that is only a 2% increase for each department, including the schools, it will take us 5 years and $8 million of the reserve to work out of the problem. If, as it has been, that our expenses run higher than the average revenue increase, we will compound the problem. So using the reserve should only be used to get us out of the problem, not to master the problem. That's it for tonight. I got a motion to adjourn. A second. All in favor? Aye.